Finally, we now come to the last of the 5 skandhas, consciousness. Now, somebody may question, Shifu, what is the difference between conception and consciousness? Yeah, conception is we form ideas about the situation, about the experience. Isn't that just consciousness? Okay, so that is a good question. Now, conception is basically the first stage when we have an experience. So remember the 5 mental factors. So in the first stage, conception arises. That is the first stage in our cognition, in our coming to read, to understand, to form an opinion about what we are experiencing. So the first conception, impression, perception. All right? And based on that conception as well as feelings that come along with it, we form more ideas, more thoughts, including volition. What do I think about it some more. We think about it in a positive way, in a negative way. We think about how it affects us, how it affects others. We think about its relevance. We think about how I can use this. Is this good for me? Is this what I want? Do I love it? Do I hate it? So all kinds of subsequent thoughts come. And then the whole process goes into the experience of my life, goes into my memory, and become part of my learning or unlearning process. So all of that is consciousness. So consciousness is the umbrella for all of our mental functions, including feeling, conception, volition, attention, and so on. Okay? You can think of it like a general. Consciousness is like a commanding general. He commands 10,000 troops. And then he will decide, okay, for just 1,000 of you go this way, explore. 1,000 of you go that way, explore. You do a map of this whole region. And you dig some trenches. And you build out some fences. And you carry some weapon, and so on, so on. So the consciousness is like the commanding general that tells the different aspects of the mind. Do this, do that, do that, do that. Okay? So now, so why is consciousness part of the 5 skandhas? Well, because the first 3 of the mental skandhas, feeling, conception, volition, these 3 play particularly important roles in our human experience. So we want to bring them out and then study them first. Okay, if we just throw, everything just consciousness, that's not very helpful. We want to be specific, be particular about certain aspects of our consciousness. All right, it helps us to gradually get an overall picture of our whole mental experience. Okay, then you may ask another question. Then what you call in consciousness is I, right? Well, why don't you just call it I? This is I, right? I is the commanding general. Well, we don't do that in Buddhism. Why? Because consciousness is empty. Consciousness is also impermanent. It is also interdependent. And we don't have complete control. Whoever I is, don't have complete control. So remember the body. When we do mindfulness of the body, we gradually realize, okay, there's no one single entity or command center that tells the body what to do. Instead, the different parts of the body just interact with each other in a certain way that works. In a similar way, there's no single point. The I that commands, that's in control of our mental activities. So, the analogy of the commanding general kind of actually break down because we have all these different mental factors, mental states, and they interact with each other kind of in a certain habitual way. And then these mental episodes, one following another, becomes what we call life. But whose life? Well, my life, right? There has to be a main character. So we created this concept, I, which is fine. It definitely is my life. But then we formed these fallacies, these wrong ideas about I being a permanent, independent entity. Okay? So, just like the body, the different parts work together. There's not a central command that tells every part what to do. There's not a central commander that tells all the mental functions what to do. And yet, they work together, one episode after another. Contact, attention, feeling, conception, volition, and judgment, like, dislike, craving, wanting this, wanting that, avoiding this, avoiding that, and cycling over and over again becomes my life. And along the way, because this accumulated ignorance or delusion, we have caused harm unto ourselves and others. For example, when we meet people that are different from us. Hey, I have this color skin, you have different color skin. Or hey, I'm taller, you're shorter. Hey, you dress differently. Yeah? Or you speak a different language, I don't understand you. Then contact, attention, feeling, conception, perhaps feeling of worrisome. Being worrisome, what's going on? Maybe a little fear, and then anxiousness, and then you're testing your interaction with that new group of people, and then you wanted yourself to be safe, so you test your strength, and you find out you can overpower them. Okay, let's do so. And because they speak a different language, they dress differently, we form this conception, this idea. They are not us, they are inferior to us. And then further idea, a few rounds of these mental episodes, these conscious activities. Later, we form this idea and we influence each other. We are better people. They are not even people, they are subhumans. And therefore, the greed comes up and says, oh, maybe we can make them do things so that we don't have to do them. Yeah? Gather the food, work hard so that we can be more comfortable. So then over time, more and more accumulated biases, discrimination, misconceptions form. We begin to detach ourselves from their feelings, how they feel, their relationships, and we become distant from them. And then when we distant from these people, it becomes easier to think of them as less, and become easier to ignore them, become easier to enslave them. and become easier to violently suppress them. And so human tragedy occurs over and over again in our history. Consciousness, misconception, feelings, consideration, thinking, working together, desires, and hatred, anger, fear, all of this working together over and over, and we form our conscious perception of this world and others. And Buddha discovered that this is the source of human suffering. And going all the way to the source, Buddha discovers this interaction that happens in our mind and where it went wrong. Where it went wrong is our conception become detached from reality. Well, they don't have feelings, so I don't have to worry about working them too hard or even killing them. With our conception of them become detached from reality when, if we put away those biases, a newborn baby can sense, a newborn baby from different colors and different race, they can sense that they are the same. They can play with each other, they can feel their feelings. But we adults, we become detached because our biases, our conception, our belief, and then we teach the next generation, and then tragedy form, more and more tragedy form. So that's the story of human suffering, and how we go back to unravel that and end suffering. You must go back to the original ignorance, meaning that how we perceive. So we need to deeply perceive the reality of this world, starting with ourselves. So in this way, we can understand and explain slavery, class discrimination, and the way that imperialist powers have treated the people of their colonies, the people that they colonized. You can understand how this come about. So, emptiness of consciousness. What is consciousness skandha? The consciousness skandha refers to the full spectrum of dynamic, complex aggregate of these mental states. These, they become behaviors that happens with each sentient being. That's the consciousness skandha. And specifically, let us study feeling, conception, volition first, and that will help us understand the whole conscious behavior better. Now, in our aim to understand ourselves and people and the world, we have formed simplifications. What are simplifications? Conceptions that represent a complex phenomena. For example, we meet a new person, and then we form a first impression. We have conceptualized this person. So in our mind, oh, that person, I know him, he is like this and this and that. When in reality, you only talk to him for like a couple hours. And then we have a conception of that person. That's the simplification that help us. This kind of conceptualization help us navigate around this world and simplify things, simplify the details we don't need to know, but then we can miss details that we need to know. And then we can become lazy in our conception. We become lazy in our labeling people and things and situations. We become too reliant on these conceptions instead of bring our mindfulness to see the details we have missed. Yeah? So personality is, what's his personality? Oh, his personality is this and that. That is a simplification. It can be useful, but we certainly have missed a lot of things, right? That person can become one-dimensional in our own mind. Stereotypes, we can form stereotypes of whole class of people, whole group of people, whole nation of people. So how much of these simplifications, these conceptions represent this complex reality? We got to know its applicability, we got to know its limitations. Yeah, where is still useful and where it can mislead us. So that's all part of the clear perception. Clearly perceive the realities that's around us. And of course, consciousness is dynamic, is constantly influence each others and being influenced by other factors. It's influenced by karma, and it helps, and it also generates more karma. And so the situation, this whole interdependence of different sentient beings, different conscious skandhas, becomes more and more complex. So when we try to understand ourselves and try to understand others, we can often be tricked by our beliefs, by our feelings, by how we perceive their behavior, and seeing one side but not seeing other side. We can be tricked by physical conditions and many other factors. So, is it hopeless? How can we then understand ourselves? How can we know the truth? Well, emptiness of the 5 skandhas is the key. So, when we talked about emptiness of form and feeling, conception, volition, and consciousness, together it all sounds quite complicated. But there is a general theme, that impermanence, that interdependence, that incomplete control. When we use these tools of emptiness to examine these things one by one, and sometimes together, as we become more used to this perspective, we become more skillful and more mindful, then you will find, well, it becomes easier. Just like any skill in life, it becomes easier and easier, and eventually we have a very deep insight. We'll open our mind to the nature of who we are. That will happen. Have faith in yourself. That will happen. So we begin by learning about emptiness of these 5 skandhas. We begin by verifying our conception, our feeling, our conscious activity, what we have perceived with facts, data. We check with reality. Does what we perceive, what we believe, and our actions lead to the lessening of suffering? Does it lead to less misunderstanding? Does it lead to more deeper comprehension? Do things begin to make sense to you? Do you begin to understand people and yourself? When something goes wrong, meaning there's suffering being caused, can you see through that suffering and go to the source and find out what would be the cause of that suffering, whether it's caused by you or by others? Yeah? So this can go very far. Alright, so the formula, the 4-step formula, consciousness is not different from emptiness, and so on. Number 1, our unconsciousness is in a state of flux. There's no permanent identity there. Right? It changes in this life, it changes next life, and that's okay. That's okay. It is what it is. Every lifetime we have a big switch of conscious aggregate. This life, Jianhu Shifu, which represents a set of complicated conscious mental factors, conscious aggregate. Next life, you become somebody else or something else, and that seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and mental faculty becomes different. Yeah, maybe you have the consciousness of a dog, or you have the consciousness of a heavenly being. You have a consciousness of something else, right? Big switch. But little switches all happen all the time. Your consciousness is in a state of flux. Consciousness is not different from emptiness. And then from this ocean of karma influences, interdependent factors, and previous mental seeds, karma seeds, a consciousness skandha is formed. You get reborn into this life. A consciousness, the 5 skandhas, a set of 5 skandhas is formed from emptiness, from this massive ocean of interconnections and past karma. And consciousness is empty. Your present conscious state is at this moment impermanent, interdependent, is incomplete control. So each moment your conscious state is empty. And finally, emptiness is consciousness. Bodhisattva can use this, take on personalities in their effort to liberate sentient beings. A very good example is a passage in the Lotus Sutra about Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. It is a famous passage where it says, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Guan Yin, can take on the body of a king, a queen, a general, a heavenly being, a Buddha, an arhat, a monk, a nun, a layperson, a laywoman, a layman, an elder, and a boy, a girl, or even take on the form and, of course, personality of non-human beings, if that is what it takes to liberate this sentient being. How is the Bodhisattva able to do that? Because consciousness is empty. And you too, you have played the role of different personalities. Sometimes you play the role of a parent. Sometimes you play a role of a child. Sometimes you play the role of a student or a teacher or householder, or maybe when you go to a 7-day meditation retreat, you live like a monk, and sometimes you're a cook, sometimes you're a carpenter, sometimes you're a plumber, sometimes you heal others, sometimes you're a storyteller. Our consciousness is infinitely flexible. And that is why a skillful bodhisattva can appear as different personalities to liberate countless sentient beings. Okay, that is our introduction to the 5 skandhas and how they are empty. Now let us ask a question to ourselves. Do you know yourself better now? How much or how little do you know yourself? well, at least we know a way to do this, right? To know ourselves, which is learn about the five skandhas and how they are empty. All right? And one of the way to know ourselves better is to know what is not the self. There's no single permanent, independent identity or I in there anywhere to be found. Examine our misconceptions, conceptions that doesn't correspond to reality, right? Examine our feelings and how see our feelings interact our judgment. And all of that eventually will accumulate to gain a true understanding of ourselves. One more little point, which is look at the human experience. In particular, the examples of art, psychology, philosophy, religion. Where do they come from? When we understand the five skandhas, okay, what is art? Art, and by that I mean all kinds of art, like painting art, drawing, literature, drama, theater. All those forms of art involves what? Involves conception, involves creating concepts, creating characters, involves feelings, yeah? Influence people with feelings and putting it all together. And a lot of work of art is representative, using some element of physical element to represent something non-physical, something in our conscious experience. Now, to what extent we can link those physical representations to our conscious experience? And so then we have all kinds of different interpretations, right? So understanding the five skandhas help us understand the endeavor of art. Psychology focuses on how the different aspects of our mind works. And then in Buddhism, there's Yogacara school, which is a very complex system of Buddhist psychology leading to enlightenment and Buddhahood. That's very interesting to study. Philosophy, human philosophy, we think about the big questions in life which we don't understand, and then we have conjectures. We create ideas, concepts, try to make sense of it all. A lot of times we miss, sometimes we hit. How do we judge whether it's a good philosophy? Well, does it correspond to the human experience? Does it help us become wiser? And does it help alleviate suffering? And religion. Well, I will not talk about other religions, but just Buddhism as a religion. How does it come about? It comes about from something very real. That is human suffering. And in order to transcend our suffering, Buddha discovered all these important aspects, psychology and philosophy ideas about how we work and how we become misguided in how we think and how we behave. And eventually, he discovered the infinite potential, the great potential that we have. How much more can each sentient being become? The ultimate state is Buddhahood, and that is pure awesomeness. Okay, and because it deals with the question of life and death and transcending death as part of transcending suffering, we call it a religion. But it's certainly a quite unique religion. It's so much grounded on our everyday experience and transcending the everyday experience. Okay, That's the end of this segment. Let us quickly mentally review the important points we talked about. What is consciousness skandha? Why is it empty? When we don't understand the emptiness of consciousness and the judgment, the ideas, the beliefs that we form, how much suffering can we cause? Or have we caused? And so, when we understand the emptiness of consciousness, how is that able to alleviate suffering? And then looking at the human experience with the perspective of the 5 skandhas together, how does it help us understand all different aspects of human endeavor like art, psychology, philosophy, religion, and other pursuits? And finally, do you understand yourself better? Or have you discovered some ways to help you understand yourself better? Okay, let us conclude this section with a dedication. May the merits of our deeds reach every part of the world. Sentient beings, large and small, all attain enlightenment.